You're live. Yes, we are live.
Yay!
It's Brian and Richard and my wife Jerry over there, and yeah, it's cool. We're doing cool stuff.
Happy
That's what we're
Sunday,
doing.
everyone.
Yeah, happy
as
Sunday.
you can tell, we're pretty toast.
Yeah, we are. You guys are going to see Sunday nights for at least a couple more weeks. Just because we have so many things happening on the next few Saturdays that we are going to just postpone things to Sunday nights for another couple of weeks. If it turns out, if it works out and everybody really likes it, we may keep it on Sunday nights permanently through the winter, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, hey, my name's Richard. Mm-hmm. Welcome to The First Layer. This is the show that explores the world of 3D printing. Today's no different because with me is... That guy, Brian. Brian's with me.
Hang on. I'm going to get my directions right, because Richard is not over there. He's over there. There we go.
There you go.
I'll get my camera orientation right. How's it going, everybody? As you can tell, I'm in a bit of a chipper mood, because I might be getting somewhere with my printer finally. So, it calls for a little happy dance. And we also had another big programming success this week, where I will show you what you're seeing. Ooh. Now, if you guys know what all that information is doing, it's a little overly fancy, but take a gamble in the chat on what this is for, and we'll let you know if you're correct.
There you go.
Adam saying says, check your mic.
Whose mic? Adam, me, or Brian?
Richard, or myself? Because I know mine's a little hot. Actually, I'll pull it back a little bit. We were trying some automatic stuff, and yeah. It's very hard when I'm not sitting right there. Welcome to the world we're in.
Brian, Adam Green, is he too low or too high? Let us know.
Yeah, this might be okay now, or I might be peaking. Let me know. I will hop into the feed as well and see what it sounds like.
All right, so let me run down the list and say hello to everybody. We've got 3D printing and painting at the top of the list. He was the first one in the room. Then we've got Robert 954, Justin R. Trevor Rickard, Corey Mack, Canadian Maker Project. That's our good friend Ron out in Ontario. We got Don Adams. You're not Maxwell Smart, are you? Don Adams? Oh, you're too young for that.
Maybe.
We got SPC 3D Guy the Jedi is here with us. Dominic Versetto, Wolf 486. We've got Rick Landon, Rex Waldy, TSWG, the Rocket Program. I'm interested to know more about the Rocket Program, that's for sure. We got Adam Green, and there's KKP3D, our good friend Tim, and Dan Adams, not Don Adams. We've got Brody Wallace as well, and Paul
another 30-degree day
Bond's here with us as well.
Yeah.
I missed Foam Crusher. Foam Crusher.
Wow.
Your audio's
great
clipping,
audience. Yeah, he was saying earlier. Let me know in the chat, guys, if the audio is better now. I could see it clipping on my mixer board, but when I connected at first, Richard and I thought we were a bit quiet, so I adjusted it. We're dialing it in. Let me know. Thumbs up.
We're dialing
thumbs down.
it in. Because last week he was a little low when I rewatched the episode, so.
There's no winning here.
Yeah. Tonight we're taking your questions as we always do. This is Ask for Help, so this is your chance to ask your questions and get our answers, whether good, bad, or indifferent. We try and help everybody as best we can. We don't know everything. We're not encyclopedias of the 3D printing world, but we do know enough to make us a little bit more than dangerous and to kind of make a living at what we do. The super chat is turned on, and if you want to get your question to the head of the line, you can always use the super chat, and then you get this funky thing.
Super chat.
And when you hear that, that's just our way of saying thank you and letting everybody know. Now, let's get into questions. Man Lee from last week was asking about his printing results, and he's got 3D printer trouble. He's got a CR6, and he's getting a lot of banding on the layer lines. And what it looks like to me is two things. One, a little bit of over extrusion, and two, he might be moving a little bit too fast. So Manly, if you are in the chat tonight, let us know. And if you're not, well, watch this on the replay, and slow down your machine and check that your extrusion multiplier is not extruding too much plastic, because it does look from the photos that you're having that kind of problem. Now, we had one other question here from, where did it go?
Right at the top. Let's see what we got.
Oh, I forgot to mention Lorax. Lorax is here too.
Oh wow,
Justin.
Yeah, we're trying to get used to. Admittedly, we're not used to crowds on these live streams, so thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you guys spending your summer with us instead of frolicking outside in the lovely outdoors.
Yeah,
who needs that, right?
Yeah, who needs the outdoors? It's overrated. Even though we just did 2 episodes where you can get outside with your kids. So Justin's asking,
no. What that episode's going to be is it's going to be the father or the mother sitting in front of the 3D printer, watching it print, and then just sending the kids outdoors. And by the time it's done, they're not going to want to be outdoors.
There you go. So Justin's asking, hey guys, I'm looking for a good setting to print TPU on an Ender 3 with a Chimera direct drive and Anycubic Chiron. Anyone have any suggestions? Well, to be perfectly honest, what you're going to have to do first and foremost, turn off the heat to your bed. You don't need any heat with TPU. I've printed TPU successfully on the Anycubic Mega Zero, and that's not got a heated bed, and I've printed several tires on it, and it works great. Heating wise, dial in your retraction, slow down your print a little bit, and you should be fine.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. The extruder, the Chimera, is fine for doing those sort of materials. Basically, you want any kind of dual gear extruder, or at least a means that the filament can't go anywhere from your extruder. Apart from that, as Richard said, you've got to take it slow. You got to minimize your retractions, and just watch for stringing and those sort of things. But I actually found it was kind of easy to print with. My biggest challenge was it kind of squeezing out of the extruder assembly.
Yeah, that's what I first experienced, and I'd never printed TPU before, but I printed on that Anycubic Mega Zero that I reviewed a while back, and I got to tell you, that thing prints TPU like a champ. I don't have to do anything to it. Okay, now we've got Brian Bond says, Creality support, help get me the correct firmware for the screen and the printer. Now, Brian Bond, that's for the Ender 3 V2. It needs updating. There is a new version of the firmware on their website. You have to go to their website and get it. Brian, I don't know if you can look that up real quick. But there is a new version of the firmware. It is 1.01. The Ender 3 V2 that I just reviewed is running on the most current version. Mine shipped with it. So I'm pretty happy with that. But I've had no problem with the screen. I've had no problem with any of the firmware that is on the machine currently. So something that Brian's going to call that up, and we'll put a link to it in the chat where you can get it.
Yeah, I think Brian was saying that Creality, they gave him the firmware, because I'm not seeing it on the website yet. I mean, this is a fairly new machine, so honestly, I have a feeling that Marlin will come up with a new version that has it supported by default before Creality drops that file. But if there is anybody from Creality in the chat, please update the website. It hasn't been updated, I think, since November for those firmwares.
Paul Cumber's asking, hey Richard, what make the Y go to the top when I home the 3D printer? If your Y is going to the top, it should be going to the back or the front. If it's coming all the way to the front, your Y-axis is the bed. So if it's coming all the way to the front, when it should be going all the way to the back, you've got to wire usually backwards. If you've done some work there. Or if you just update
the firmware, it's reversing your directions.
Yeah, it's reversing directions.
And you know, sometimes it's, I swear, I rebuilt my printer today in the exact same fashion, and it went the wrong way, even though it was the same firmware. So I just went and changed. If you saw our episode last week, we talked about invert Xdir, invert Ydir, invert Zdir. It's a lot easier to change that parameter than it is to rewire your motor cables. So just look into your firmware, look up, in this case, invert_y_dir, and if it's a true, change it to a false, and vice versa.
And finally, we have Joseph Jolly. He says, are you going to have your show on Sunday? Well, for the next few weeks we are. We're not sure if we're going to make it permanent or not, because over the next few weeks, Brian and I are very busy on Saturdays. We had to move our launch back to September 5th, the first Saturday, which is a long weekend in September, just because people that are involved with this launch, they have other priorities, and no fault of theirs. We're fine to move it, and that just gives us a little bit more time to work some of the kinks out of some of the stuff that we're doing. So for now, for the next few weeks, we're going to be going on Sundays.
As we found.
Yeah. So for the next few weeks, we're going to be going on Sundays. Christopher Nicholson, good evening or morning from Bulgaria. It's so hot here at 4 a.m. Well, it's been hot here too.
Yeah, we finally got a cool down where we're sub 90 for our American friends, sub 30 degrees for our Canadians. It hasn't been fun, and it's actually been higher humidity than normal, and so we are having our typical filament stringing issues,
Yes.
our requirements to dry a lot more. So I backed that Sunlu filament dryer, and I'm hoping to get it soon to show you guys if it's any good. It was like $70 Canadian, so much cheaper than some of the other options on the market. Hopefully it works out. I just saw some, actually a very interesting question from Guy the Jedi at the top here, saying, do you think there will be a 64-bit 3D printer motherboard? Simple answer, no. There's no need for it whatsoever. In fact, even 32-bit, there's no need for it, but basically nobody's going to produce an 8-bit processor that runs at 70 or 80 megahertz. We could go into the nature of instructions and what the 32-bit actually means. It just means that the more bits, the higher 32-bit number, for instance, like 32, 64, 128, the more bits it can cram into a single instruction. But with these machines, they're running so fast, we've never noticed the difference between an 8-bit and a 32-bit if running at the same clock frequency. 32-bit will be with us, I'm going to say, at least for the next 5 years, unless there's a reason to go to 64-bit, for instance, if you need more memory.
Rick Landon's got a question here. He says, how to time the X and Y move in relation to plastic flow? You don't have to. You don't have to time those movements.
Yep, that's now that is a bit of a loaded question, I should admit, because in normal fashion, yes, you don't have to calibrate that. However, there is an extrusion mode available on Prussia's and on the newest Marlin versions called volumetric. And what it does is, instead of basically with your slicer, you tell it, my nozzle is capable of flowing this much filament per second, and your speeds are calculated based off how much max filament it can flow in that time period. And I haven't experimented much with it yet. I've heard people swear by it, but it requires too many changes, and my machine prints fine with the regular method. So if you're ever dealing with a slicer, when it slices everything up into a bunch of G1 and G0 linear moves, for each movement it goes and determines, based off your nozzle size, how many steps it would take to push that much filament out. If you're having inconsistencies in your layers, more than likely it's actually your extrusion multiplier, which would go back to your step per millimeter for your extruder motor. And I don't think we did an entire episode on just doing the extrusion multiplier, but we've mentioned it before. The measurement test of mark off 120 millimeters of filament, tell it to extrude 100, and measure how much room is left and figure out how much it actually moved.
All right, I got to go back here a little bit. Somebody's saying that you're echoing, Brian. I don't know why you would be echoing, because you're not echoing on my end.
Yeah, let me know, guys, if there is something in the chat. I can definitely I can boost this up a bit if we're getting a bit too much background noise there.
Werewolf 486 is my first question. Inland PETG filament has been nothing but terrible for my son, and I'm printing on 2 Kitty X Plus machines. Other brands print fine. Is that the filament, the machine, or us?
That's a very good question, actually.
In all honesty, I'm going to say it's probably the filament. Not all filaments are created equally, and we know this because we test filaments all the time. And people
Yes.
send us filaments like by the caseload sometimes, and we test them and we give them the results. And sometimes it can be a product of the environment, but most times it's just bad filament. And if it's all from the same batch, then chances are it's a bad batch. What I would do is, if you want to make sure that it's not your machine and it is the filament, buy a completely different roll of the same brand and run it through your machine. If you're still getting the problems, then what I would say is stop using that brand.
And also, yeah, PETG does like to absorb moisture, and
Yes.
I've received several filaments from all sorts of vendors where they've already become saturated before I even receive them. Now, if you take a look at a vacuum-packed seal of filament, you might think, okay, yeah, it's got the desiccant pack in there, it's keeping it dry. But what it's actually done is the desiccant pack is sitting inside the center of the spool and has no exposure to that filament in there, so that gap in there is quite dried out, but the filament might still have some moisture. And with PETG doing all sorts of terrible stuff with moisture, it's not nearly as tolerant as PLA. So my question would be back to you, Werewolf, is what exactly is it doing? Is it stringing? Is it bubbling? And then based off that, we can tell you if there's something you could do about it. But if not, print something simple known like a calibration cube, email Inland, either through Amazon or directly, and say, this is what I'm getting with the filament, and then you can show them the equivalent model from another brand, PETG, and say, this is what I'm getting on the same printer, same settings. Do you recommend any changes?
There you go. We got one here from Foam Crusher. He says, I sent you guys a photo last week. I'm getting white patches under the first layer. Prusa Mini PLA Plus 220 with 60 bed. Any thoughts? I can tell you exactly what's going on. I did see the photo, and Foam Crusher, I'm going to tell you, you're too close to the bed. That's the problem that you're having, is you are definitely too close to the bed. So when you get those little patches that look a little translucent, they don't look white, what's happened is the head of the print head has gone over that area when it's laying down another line, and it's just pulling it up a little bit because the nozzle, first of all, is too hot, and secondly, you're too close to the bed. And that's exactly what's going on there. Good evening, RT. Morgan Pierce, good evening. Where am I here? I'm losing my mind.
Yeah, we're bouncing around because we got a lot of feedback from you guys. Really appreciate it. Dominic Versetto is asking, what's the last word on the amount of memory in the new SKR Mini E3? Is it 512K or 256K? Based off my experience so far, your mileage may vary because there are several batches out there, and until I can get about 6 months out, there's still a risk of getting old stock. So I've received a lot of messages of people saying that they are now shipping, especially if you order directly. It comes with the STM32F103R ET6, which is 512K, and some of them were coming with a 256 variant RCT6 that can accept 512K code, but I couldn't see any identifier on the top of the chip that identified which way it was. So to play it safe, I said the ones I've seen are 256. However, I'm pretty much guaranteed if you order it direct from Big Tree, you're going to get the 512K variant, and therefore my argument against that was a bit moot.
All right, so next one is from Robert Avery. Again, thank you guys for all of your questions this evening. Please use the super chat down at the bottom if we've answered your question to your satisfaction, because that's how we get paid. And that's how we keep bringing this show to you from both of our homes as COVID dictates.
Yes.
So he says, Robert Avery says, had my heater for the nozzle crap out, only got to 100C, changed the heater, same thing, though the heat gun to the hot end and the temp went up, verifying the thermistor. Any thoughts on this issue? First of all,
I'm wondering,
what printer is it? Because I need to know what printer you're using. And secondly, once I know that, I'll be able to tell you probably what's going on with the board. Manley, I don't know if you received my email about my issue. I did, and you're a little late, but I will tell you again. What seems to be happening is that you're over extruding and you're moving too fast. So slow down your machine and check your multiplier, your extrusion multiplier, and then it should work out for you. Adam Green, Gary T, Morgan Pierce. All right.
Brody Wallace saying, I picked up the Ender 3 Pro. Is the Creality slicer good to use with it, or should I just go with Cura? I would say have both. Start with Creality slicer, make sure it's got a good print coming out of it, and then switch over to Cura with the latest version, see if it provides the same results, because the Cura profile is community supported, and so it may work with your machine, it may not. The Creality one, of course, has been dialed in for Creality printers, and as much as I like to go on bleeding edge of software, you don't always have to jump to the latest version of Cura just because it's available, unless there's a bug you're trying to sort out.
I agree. Okay, now where are we?
Ryan Goppout will say, my CR-10 is getting inconsistent bands on the prints. Do you know what it is?
Inconsistent bands? Go ahead. I'll let you go ahead.
I mean, it's a rabbit hole. There can be tons of issues with that. Many times for me, it's actually a misalignment of the Z-rod or any kind of binding that it catches on itself, though it tends to be a bit more repeatable on that. It may also be vibration. If you're ripping your machine too hard and it's not nice and snugged up for its frame, you may provide a bit too much wiggle room, and it doesn't take a lot to create artifacts on your prints, as we've found many times. What's your thoughts, Richard?
I think probably part of it has to do with exactly what you said. Secondly, and you're going to hear me repeat this over and over again, slow down your prints. Everybody wants to do 120, 100 millimeters per second, 180 millimeters per second, even 70 or 80 millimeters per second. In a lot of cases, that's too fast, because what will happen is that head is not stopping fast enough to make it around that corner or around that edge. So it's shifting just a little bit, just enough to push that line off, and then it corrects itself, keeps going, and then it does it again. And it can be inconsistent throughout the entire print. Slow down your print. My advice to anybody that's printing any type of material, you want a good quality finish on your print, start at around 50 millimeters per second, go down to 40 if you have to.
Hey, not sure if you saw Dominic Versetto. Thank you for the $2.99, sir. Much appreciated.
Oh, I didn't see that. Hang on.
Oh,
Super chat.
There we go. Thank you, Dominic.
Delayed. I wish I wasn't as delayed. That would have been great.
Sorry. I'm trying
Rick Liner was Steam comes off as filament. What? And Morgan Pierce jumped to it. Steam is 100% wet filament. What you're seeing is water vapor vaporizing, and it's a great example of how you might feel a little bit of texturing on the surface if you ran your fingers over that filament, but the water is such at a microscopic level and so spread out that you wouldn't be able to feel a moisture or moistness to the filament.
Yeah, if you're getting steam coming off there, you definitely have a moisture issue in your filament, and that could have come directly from the factory. So my suggestion to you would be send back the unopened packets of your filament. If you haven't had it that long, if you bought it off of Amazon, Amazon should take it all back. Even if it's open, I believe they take it back.
Yeah, they're pretty laid back. Obviously, don't abuse that.
Yeah.
But and if you don't want to send it back, if you are having moisture in your filament, we've gone through a couple different methods to keep filament dry. But if you want to make your filament dry, I 100% recommend buying a food dehydrator. If you can find one used on your local marketplace, even better, because they just don't get very hot, and so the risk of actually melting filament is fairly low on them. I buy, I'm trying to remember which one I buy here. They're about $50 Canadian on Amazon, and they're circular, so you can go and drop a reel in. I always recommend, if you're going to do a print job, go and run the filament dry with the filament for a good, probably 4 hours before you put it on the machine there, and you'll find it's like night and day. You almost didn't realize that there was any film or moisture in your filament until you dry it out.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, you really want to make sure that the material that you have is dry and you're keeping it dry over the long period. So if you're only taking a little, you're only going to use a little bit. Once you're done with it, throw it back into a bag with some desiccant, or throw it into a sealable Tupperware, or whatever you have to do to keep that filament dry and keep the moisture off of it. We have a quick question here from Christopher Nicholson. He says, after a couple of hours of printing on my CR-10S, my Z axis is out. What's the best way to get the Z motors to stay the same? I have to reset the motor, usually bringing the right side a little higher. I'll tell you exactly what's going on there, sir, because I just fixed it on my own machine. What's going on there? What's going on there is the eccentric spacers that bring in and out those wheels, first of all, are too tight. So you're getting this as it's going up. Okay, you're getting it shifting as it's going up. When that happens, your steppers are never going to be the same. So this one, the one on the left side, is going to try and catch up to the one on the right side, or vice versa. And what you have to do is you have to make sure that they have no play in them. Just by running your finger on them, make sure that they're all fairly snug, but not over snug. If they're over snug, those rods in the back are doing this as well. Okay, so you really want to make sure that it's just tight enough, but not over tight. And I think that's going to solve your problem. What you should do is bring it all the way down, get two things of equal size, whether you're using, a couple of Excedrin bottles or something that is exactly the same size on both sides. Put it right on that X rod and level it out, get it perfectly level, and then, keep going that way, and you should be fine.
You know what? Okay, I just want to quickly apologize to everyone in the chat, because I realize why I sound like absolute bloody shit. It's because, hello everybody, I'm live from the webcam instead of my very expensive microphone here.
Oh, there you go.
All right, I'm going to try and fix that real quick, so I will be back with everybody shortly.
Okay. Then I will just go to me. All right, so now we have Werewolf 486. They will have issues with stringing and building up on the nozzle. The poop on the print leaves a brown stain and blob. Yes, it does. That does happen. Robert Avery, sorry, the heater problem is on the CR-10S Pro. Heated the hot end with the heat gun and the temperature went up fine. That verified the thermistor. Thought if it might be the daughter board. It probably is the daughter board. So I don't know how long you've had it, Robert, but all electronics on the Creality products are warranted for 1 year. So get in touch with the person that you bought it from and see if they can't do some service on it for you. Parker Cooper, I want to print something solid. Where do I change this? You're going to change it on your infill. You're going to make your infill 100%. If you make your infill 100%, it will be completely solid. If you are, if you want the entire thing solid, so you don't want any support material on the inside, then you would also take that up to 100%. Okay? Hang on, Brian.
Correct feed. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, at least you can hear me. Perfect. All right. Yep. Good. Had to set it to the correct microphone. I don't know why my Windows changed the default. Werewolf saying, we're building a direct feed system from the dehydrator to the printers now, but 3D printing the parts with... Oh, yeah. Yeah, with the stains. Yeah, that can be a problem. But if it's just cosmetic, just keep rolling with it. That's the fun thing with this hobby is it doesn't have to be a finalized product. If there's something really ugly on mine, like if I get the brown blob on white, I'll just paint over it.
Rick Landon's asking, do the belts have to be like new shape to prevent layer shifting? No, they don't. No. You just have to be able to tension them so that you have the right amount of tension on the belts. If the belts are slipping on your printer, Rick, if you're using a Creality product, those two little bolts that are at the end that hold the idler at the other end, what you want to do is just loosen them up a little bit, drive something down in there between the actual X rod and the idler, and just force it out a little bit. It'll put a little bit more tension on there, and then tighten up those 2 screws, and you should be just fine.
Basically, belt tightening it's a bit of a balancing game. If you over tighten it, it's going to be quite jerky, and depending on the grade of your wheels, you'll actually notice a lot more artifacting and jitters. And if you do it too loose, not only can it slip on the gears, which you would definitely hear if it slipped, but you'll also get a weird kind of response where some movements are actually delayed because the tension of the rubber, you can expand and contract it before it actually fully shifts the rest of the chain. Yep. So it's got to be a bit of a balancing game with the belts. You'll find it a lot with the bigger printers, especially too. The more weight that you have on there, the more tense and tight you want it. And on some of the printers, I think like the CR-10S, they actually have an idler pulley to help tension it up just a little bit around the gears. But generally, any kind of artifacting on something like that, you can also work around that by dropping your acceleration. You know, there's a reason the CR-10S and Ender 5s, they recommend 500 excel, and the bigger models, they recommend 300, just because it handles the shift of mass basically a lot better.
All right, so we have, next up is Werewolf 486. We're building a direct feed system.
Oh, we just
okay, sorry.
We just went through that one. Dan Adams saying what? Yeah, we're catching up. It's been a long week for us. I'm sure for you guys too. What filament do you recommend for print part coolers? I'll let you start with this one, and then I'll give my opinion.
My personal preference for part coolers is either going to be ABS, if you can print ABS, or PETG. Those are my two that I think are the best. And if you can't print ABS, then PETG is definitely the way to go. You are going to experience a little bit more stringing, however, with PETG.
And for me, I know this may seem a little weird. I always recommend PLA, or in many cases, if you have availability of it, resin. And the reason I say that is because if you're getting enough heat coming off your heat block that it's going to soften any kind of ducts for your part cooling, then you've got other issues. Then you've got to insulate that block a little bit better. Just because, PLA is easy enough to print. The resin, I like it for the accuracy. And I printed a couple of ducts in resin because it's actually easier to build it without putting supports inside that blower assembly.
Justin, I think we answered your question already. You may not have been listening. The TPU on the Ender 3.
Yeah, just make sure. Simply put, TPU right up is just print it hotter, print it slower, and knock down that retraction. And turn off the part cooling fan. It likes to cool slowly.
Yeah. That Dev Tim, who also just sent me an email,
perfect.
put the same question in the chat, so I'm just going to read it from the chat here. It says, I recently got my first Ender 3. I print with SPLA with a nozzle at 225 and a bed at 90. On prints that go away from the center of the bed, the middle of the first layer peels up. Any solutions? I can tell you exactly what's going on there. Your bed's too hot. Bring that bed temperature down to about 50 or 60, because what's happening is that 90 should be for TPU or ABS. That is way too hot to be printing any PLA, whether it's PLA Plus, SPLA, or anything like that. That bed is way too hot. So what's happening is your heat is mostly in the center, and then it radiates out. So what's happening is that outside area is cooling faster than the center. So it's going to curl up because it's shrinking faster. So turn down your heat to about 50 or 60 on the bed, and bring your nozzle down a little bit too. I would bring that down to right around 210. I think you're printing a little hot, maybe even 205. Brian?
Yeah, and then with that too, what I'd like you to do, Tim, is run your nozzle around the bed and see if when it's heated at 60 degrees, if you're having any bowing of the bed. Because if it's printing and fine in the center, and then as you go outwards it's worse, what you're actually having is a curvature of the bed where you got a dip in the center and you've leveled it for the home being good at the center, but as you go out, it's actually warping outwards. And unfortunately, I don't have my big steel sheet up here, but my CR-10S downstairs had a 3mm steel sheet for that entire build size. And I did some weird drilling, had a few mistakes, but it still was fine and everything was flat. I heated up and immediately it bowed upwards or bowed downwards. So when I heated it up, it was after I did my bed leveling and everything looked good, and then the print was just garbage. So especially if you have a square or any kind of flat leveling device, heat that thing up and then just put the beam right across and see if you see a dip in the center.
There you go. Okay, so
Parker Cooper also said to that glass, yes.
Yes,
a glass bed would definitely deal with any of those bowing issues.
RT, sorry if the question was already asked, but other than the metal extruder, any other recommended upgrades for my Ender 3 V2? No. I'm using mine completely stock right now, Richard, and I can tell you I've had no issues. It's printed like a champ every time. And right now I'm printing PETG on it with the stock hot end, and I've never been able to do that with an Ender before. So kudos to Ender for that.
If you're going to go for upgrades, I would say first things first, stock up on spare parts.
Yeah.
Get you some extra thermistors
and change out the extruder to a metal extruder. That's all I would do.
Now, bear in mind, I haven't looked at the V2. Does that one come with a good power supply?
It does. It comes with
there you go.
The Max Meanwell. Comes with the Meanwell.
Meanwell, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
And Justin, thank you very much. Thing. I love my Superman in the back. He's not done yet, but we'll get there. Javier
it's been
Lopez.
Too hot to paint this summer.
Yeah. Javier Lopez, first layer issues with PETG here. Using the Ender 3 Pro build tack, the PETG will not stick, and where it would stick, it would fray up and string pretty bad. Any ideas? Yes. You can't use build tack with PETG. Not the regular build tack. You can use the PEI build tack with PETG, because what will happen, you're going to have to get a little bit more or a little closer to the bed if you're going to use that regular build tack surface. And I've experienced this myself on other machines. You really have to get it in there, and then it's a real pain in the backside to get off afterwards, unless you've got a flex bed. So in all honesty, what I would say to you is, Javier, take that off, put a piece of glass on in the interim, use some glue stick, and you're all set. I thought I had some glue stick on my desk here, but I don't, so I thought I did.
PETG, for those of you who have not worked with PETG, honestly, PLA is a stupidly easy material to work with, and you get a little bit complacent, and the moment you go into anything else, whether it's HIPS, ABS, PETG, you definitely have to have your machines dialed in a little bit tighter and ready to go for that material. It's not as simple as switching between the two and you have a magical material that's that much more robust and strong as PLA. PLA just is so much more tolerant to design errors that it's so easy to work with.
Yeah. Trevor Rickard, was there any reason to upgrade your power supply? Would there be any reason? Yes. There's a couple of reasons. The cheap Chinese power supplies that 90% of printers used to come with, now manufacturers are getting smart and they're going to Meanwells, don't regulate the power well enough to function properly on machines. They may work for a year, they may work for 2 years, they may work for 5 years, they may work for 6 days. But once you get into a better quality power supply of the same voltage and same wattage, you'll find that you're going to get cleaner power going to all the components on your 3D printer.
And that matters a lot more for the Trinamics, for instance. They definitely prefer cleaner power. And another thing to add to that is that when you buy we'll call it an off-brand power supply that says 500 watts, you may not know what that means, right? That might be just, it can handle a surge of 500 watts and run continuous at 320. So when you start getting into more powerful hot ends and more powerful beds, you're going to need that reliability of the power supply. And simply put, that power supply will outlive you most of the time.
Super chat.
Hey, we got a super chat from Adam Green. He says, you guys have any experience with remote direct drive extruders? If so, are they worth the trouble? Remote direct drive? I'm not sure what you're meaning
yeah.
there.
I can tell you right now, I'm using multiple direct drive setups that were all 3D printed. Oh, remote. Let's see, Zesty Nimble, the remote direct drive extruder. I haven't seen any of these, to be honest. Basically, direct drive, the idea, it does create a cleaner print, but the downside of direct drive is that you're adding more weight onto your X gantry. And I can probably share this for those of you who aren't on our Facebook page. If you're not, you should be. This was this afternoon here of my big printer, my Ender, or my CR-10S, and you can see it's a direct drive setup. But what you may not see very clearly in the back end is I actually had a sheet of aluminum milled, and I've converted over to a linear rail. And the reason for that was because I had wobble on my prints that I couldn't get around that were a result of that extra weight. So even in this wacky prototype stage with zip ties everywhere and electrical tape holding in my end stop, it's still producing a better result than it was with the wheels versus this linear rail setup. So we'll be going kind of more into motion stability in the future and how the mechanics can impact your prints. But I just want to give you guys, an idea that just because you can print it doesn't mean it's going to improve the results. And in this case, the weight threshold, even on a CR-10S V, was a little too much for it.
I want to address Foam Crusher's question here. He says, you said to print PLA Plus at 205. If the spool label says 200 or 220 plus minus 10C, do you still say to go that low? Absolutely, I do. It all depends on the environment that you're in. Now, as far as your problem, though, is more with the bed than it is with the actual temperature of the hot end, I would say to go to 205, but to be on the safe side so that you can get the right stuff printing properly for you, we have a video on how to build a temperature tower in Cura and how to get those results. And I explain what the results mean from one of those temperature towers. So I would go and print a temperature tower at the varying degrees and see where you get the best results from. And that will tell you exactly what that material does or where it's going to print the best, where you're going to get the best overhangs, where you're going to get the best and sharpest corners, where you're going to get the best bridging, all that sort of stuff. So I would go and print a temperature tower. Just look in our tutorials playlist because it is in there.
So just bouncing back to the previous question about the remote direct drive extruders, I was just reading into it because I didn't have any background experience on these, but it does make sense. It is basically a direct drive extruder, but the motor driving it is still back where your traditional extruder motor is. So what they're doing is they're basically using a chain, a cable through there to transfer the operation remotely, and it passes it down through the line. So in the design itself does make sense. Unfortunately, they're all sold out right now, so I couldn't comment on pricing, but I like the idea of it, adding only 25 grams. If they come back in stock, maybe I'll order one and give you guys a review on it.
There you go. Parker Cooper, Amylin filament wood PLA garbage. I don't know. I've never tried it. Wood PLA can be tough to print. Mm-hmm. You do need a little bit bigger nozzle. You'll have to go from a 0.4 to a 0.5 or 0.6 to print any wood with any great success.
I think wood PLA is kind of overrated, honestly. It's fun for the first couple of attempts, but I find the house smells of burning wood. The finish at the end of the day, I tried sanding a few, and I wasn't liking how the sanding results were coming out. And they're all just standard colors. It's like cutting into a particle board table. It doesn't have any texture or any unique designs that I think would warrant keeping it as a base material. Now, that being said, there are some cute, cool little things you can print with it, but I find it clogs up nozzles and just has too many impurities in it. You're actually better to buy basically a primer and get a wood finish and just finish it yourself and just do your own dyeing even.
Yeah, that's the way I would go too. I've tried wood and I've had success with wood. At the end of the day, though, it's more trouble than it's worth. And if you have to swap out nozzles, that can be a big pain in the ass as well. Dan Adams, temp towers. Yes, temperature towers are what you print to test your filament. And I recommend that everybody do this with a brand new roll of filament. Go and do a temperature tower, because that's going to give you all the information that you need to always print with that particular material successfully. Okay? So we do have a video on it. Actually, we have 2 or 3 videos on doing temp towers in our playlist under tutorials on our YouTube page, which you're on right now. Peter Reynolds, he says, "Hi guys, is BL touch failure very common?" Unfortunately, it can be. It can be.
Yeah. I mean, in my experience, and this is my biggest gripe with the BL Touch, my number one failure is if I screw up with a print, these new plastic pins are they're just not robust. And I understand it's to protect the electronics, which is great and all, but even at $5 Canadian a pop, I've been through about 4 or 5 of them in the past few months, just from mistakes. So it kind of is annoying. Now, that can be worked around, and one of the things that, as I've been trying to dial in this printer you can get, and I'll link it in the chat, is there are people creating BL Touch protectors that you can print that just shield it once the pin is retracted, and that seems to help quite a bit. So as soon as I find that link here, because everyone knows how great Thingiverse is with this new theme, I will post it there. You know what the worst thing was last week? I had to go back to use Yegi to search up, because I searched SKR and it said no results found over and over again. I was so frustrated with it. I'm sorry, they broke a good thing. I don't like to voice any negativity towards them, but man, they really messed up Thingiverse.
Sean Steed says he hasn't printed anything for 2 months, waiting on parts with all upgrades still not working right. Do I need to flash firmware? Probably, yes. I would say so. Depending on what upgrades that you've made, you're probably going to have to do a new firmware upgrade to take advantage of whatever upgrades that you've made to your print. That's the long and the short of it, unfortunately. Adam Green's got a question for you, Brian.
Yeah. You're saying it's open source, referring to the remote direct drive. Best printed with resin. I've heard you only need to order a few gears that way, or you can get the whole thing. Well, it's funny they say you can print it with resin, but you need to order a few gears, yet you could 3D print those gears. So I'm going to take a look and see if there's some open schematics out there for it. As I said, I've been battling the big machine, and as you've seen, I'm actually ordering custom aluminum parts just to get it exactly how I want it. So now that that's starting to settle down, I might be able to look back into these neat things. And honestly, just reading into that Zesty after a minute, I'm rather impressed, honestly. Lorex was just saying, finally fixed all my problems. Turns out on the Ender 3 V2, having the filament roll on top is a bad idea. The filament running into a dual gear extruder at 90 degrees will break your filament 10 out of 10. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, one thing I've told a lot of people when they buy the printers is put your filament in a place where it's not going to be bent if you're printing in the entire volume of that printer. So we always recommend you mount it on the left-hand side of the printer, as they always seem to feed from the left, and try to mount it at least far back enough from the printer so that when it's at the absolute top of the gantry, you're only having a couple degrees of bending, because if you look at a lot of the CR-10s out there, everybody starts to wear through their filament runout sensor assemblies because the filament is not feeding directly into it. So that's a great tick, Lorex. Thank you for that, because we've all experienced that.
Yes. And I usually take my filament spool holder and I move it down to the back corner of my printer on usually all my Ender 3s. I just find it works better down there. Corey Mack says he had a Zesty Nimble version 1.1. Don't like it. Didn't like it. I gave it to Chris Riley. He didn't like it either.
I mean, I'm curious about it, and I'm not saying I'm enthusiastic about it, because if you've ever ran anything from a chain, Unfortunately, I don't even have it here right now, but downstairs, my iFixit kit, it comes with an extender that has a flexible end so you can get into weird places. And that's basically what this is you're creating a flexible drive shaft. Well, if you don't manage that properly, there is so many opportunities for it to bow itself or to have a compression ratio so that your torque is not directly transferred to the hot end. So I haven't read into it to see how they overcome that. It's more of a curiosity.
Ohio Teen Tech, you are obviously new here because I've never seen you in our chat before. Welcome if you are new here. He says, I'm having severe scarring on the first layer on my Ender 3. You're too close to the bed. I'm going to tell you that straight up, you're too close to the bed. So re-level your bed. Make sure that you're just getting very little grab on that piece of paper when you're doing your bed leveling for all four corners. Make sure that your hot end is heated up. Make sure that your bed is heated up to the temperature of the plastic that you're using most. If you're using PLA, then it's going to be 200 on the nozzle, 50 or 60 on the bed. Let it heat up for a good 5 minutes or so before you level that bed, and then go diagonally in an X to the corners of the bed so that you're adjusting them properly. And I think that will solve your problem.
Now, you don't want to leave paper under it too long, but I can tell you right now, I've leveled it with that nozzle hot as well with paper. It's not combusted or anything. It might scar a little bit, but just make sure you do it when heated, because without going into metallurgy, metal still will warp and stretch and do all sorts of different things as it heats up. And so you never want to level your bed cold. You always want to do it at least close to 60. Even if you're doing it at 90, obviously you don't want to burn yourself. So do it at like 60 degrees, give it, set the temperature, and then walk away. And the reason I tell you that is because the thermistor for the bed is located on the heating element. It's not located within the bed. And so there is a temperature offset, and there's a time it takes for that heat to transfer from your heat plate up to your bed.
And there you have it. Sean says, thank you. Saw your channel for firmware update and will proceed with downloading updates. Excellent, Sean. Ohio Teen Tech, I leveled the bed over 15 times and the layer height is perfect, but I still get the same result. I'm using glass.
Okay, so your bed leveling might be proper. The paper test it's a point of reference, right? For a lot of prints, it'll be fine, but sometimes it may actually just be a little too close. It depends on how much play you gave on that paper. Yeah. Because what's hard to tell is, let's say if this is your thick piece of paper here, right? If you go and clamp the nozzle hard against that and you can move it, but it's really kind of coarse, then you're too close. You literally want to have it so that you can just feel the tension of the paper slightly underneath it.
Correct.
If you do it any tighter than that, then you are far too close. But the idea with that is supposed to be that the paper gives you roughly, I want to say, a 0.1 millimeter height over the bed. It could be closer to 0.2, but it's meant as a point of reference. If you're doing firmware modifications on your printer, even if you don't have a bed leveling sensor, I highly recommend you enable the baby stepping feature, because that will allow you to hot tune your Z offset. And if you're a little too close, or let's just say your Z end stop was a fraction of a second delayed for some weird reason, you can fine tune it specifically just for that print, and it'll clear after that print job for the next one. So usually on the first layer, I'll do a skirt or a brim or something so I can go and dial it in, the baby stepping, while it's drawing that part that doesn't matter. And then by the time it's printing my main part, it's perfect. I can walk away.
Peter Reynolds, I am going to be by to see you tomorrow morning, just so you know, and we'll get all of your issues fixed up at your place tomorrow morning. Now, Doug says, clean all the old glue off, apply a thin coat after. Yes, that's a good idea. Clean your glass. That could be part of it too. Glue builds up, and I know this because I'm the laziest SOB on the face of the planet when it comes to cleaning my beds.
It's more glue.
Yeah, I just keep putting more glue on it. When it comes to cleaning my beds, I'm very neglectful in that. So clean off your bed. I'd say at least once every couple weeks. give it a good cleaning, wipe it down with some isopropyl alcohol, put it back on the bed, do a bed level, just make sure everything's right where it should be, and also make sure that you pull your filament back out of your nozzle a little bit so that you're not squeezing out, plastic while you're trying to do a bed level, because that can knock your bed level off every time. And at the end of the day, that can be a real heartache. And once you clean that off, you should be fine. And just use a little wire brush. A little wire brush will take care of all of that for you.
I've seen text saying I clean it after every print. That's great.
Yep.
But at the same time, I feel like there's a better application method perhaps for you, because glue should last more than one print.
Yes.
If you're going through glue on every single print job, you're probably too low to begin with. And so with your hot nozzle, glue is, I want to say it's PVA. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. So PVA, which is like a glue gun stick, it melts at about 65 to 70 degrees Celsius. And so the idea is supposed to be when you apply glue on the bed and when you bring it up to that temperature of 60 degrees, it's malleable in that it's very flexible, it's very sticky, and it'll hold down the filament. But as it cools, the malleability of it goes away, and the stickiness towards this plastic is not great. And so it'll loosen off your print once it cooled down. But if you are going too close to that bed and you're essentially smearing the nozzle with this hot filament across this already softened material, you're basically heating it up and trying to scrub it off or take it off with a wedge of some sort.
Yeah.
And so it will come off with your print, and you'll see it's definitely smoother in that area where the last one is, and then you're just trying to print on what's essentially a tainted glass surface.
There you go. Parker Cooper says, "What's with the hairspray?" Hairspray?
Oh,
I don't use. I'm going to tell you, a lot of people swear by hairspray. They'll spray it on the bed, and they think it's the greatest coating since sliced bread. I'm going to tell you, I've tried every adhesion method out there, and Brian can attest to this. I've tried everything on the face of the planet, and I'm going to tell you, at the end of the day, hairspray is probably the worst one you can use because it gets everywhere. Because it's an aerosol and it goes into the air, just because you're spraying away from your printer doesn't mean it's not getting on your printer. It will get on your printer. You ever go into the bathroom after your mom or your sister sprayed their hair, or your wife, and you touch something and it just has that little tackiness to it? That's hairspray. And it gets freaking everywhere. And if it gets into your motors and gets into your electronics, guess what? It's going to wear them out prematurely. So avoid using hairspray. Any aerosols. Avoid using aerosols completely.
I mean, the idea with aerosol, honestly, is that it's supposed to, you're supposed to be able to, if you spray it, if you've ever seen a bad paint job, this is kind of my example. If you've ever seen a bad paint job on a car where it looks really crusty, it's because they applied too much material at too close of a distance, and they didn't go and spray it evenly across it. That's the concept with hairspray, is you spray it to create a textured surface. And for some people, it does work great. In fact, I had some good success with PETG specifically. It seemed to be the one material that I liked to nicely bind to my glass. But it was not consistent enough for me to want to stick with it, plus having to take my glass sheet outside every time to spray it so I don't get it all over my printer. It just wasn't fun. Morgan Pierce was saying can't recommend 3mm PEI sheets with spring steel enough, and that is basically my recommendation right now.
Yep.
Without even doing my video yet, I'm going to tell you guys, I have been buying some spring sheets since basically late December here, and they're all finally coming in. Every single one of my machines currently right now has a spring steel sheet. Now, admittedly, I've only been printing with PLA. I haven't given it a go yet with any other materials, but it's a game changer, those sheets. So if you get a chance to check out one locally, wherever you're at, and I'll provide some links when I do my episode here shortly, I think you'll be very, very happily impressed. I think, Richard, you're playing with a couple right now too, correct?
I am playing with a couple from BQ, same people that do the Big Tree stuff. They sent me a couple of spring sheets, one for the CR-10 upstairs, and I put one on the Ender 3V2 today, and I'm actually printing PETG on it right now, and I've been printing PETG on the other one, and it's working absolutely stunning. And this is for Lorax. Hey, thank you, Lorax, for the $5. Do you guys have a good direct drive extruder suggestion for the Ender 3 V2, or is getting a BMG and 3D printing just good as buying one of the Bowden? Bowden sucks. Bowdens don't suck. If you're here's the thing. We listen to the internet way too much, and there's way too many experts out there. And I want to say this, I'm not an expert. I'm a guy who's learned what I've learned through trial and error. And so when I tell you something, I've already done it. If I don't know, I'm going to tell you I don't know. At the end of the day, direct drive and Bowden, neither one of them are better than the other. In my personal opinion, I've used them both. I find that direct drive is a little heavier on the x-axis, so when it's moving back and forth, you can tend to get more aberrations in your print. On direct drive, you don't get that. However, when you're using filaments that require you to have or that have some stretch to them, like TPU, it's more beneficial to have direct drive, yes, but it can be done through a Bowden. At the end of the day, though, I'm going to say to you that don't go and upgrade to a direct drive right away. Play with what you have. Yeah. Brian, you go ahead. I'm gonna let you jump in on this now because you have both.
Yes, I do. And I linked in the chat there about 5 months ago. I did an episode on 3D printing a direct drive extruder for the Ender 3 Pro. And I think I roughly covered the pros and cons quite a bit in there, but this one was nice because you can print it. It uses all your stock parts, and if you don't like it, I think the only thing you have to buy is a little bit of extra Bowden tubing to recoup it. So that's the main thing. If you're going to start doing mods to tinker around with things, do your best to make it reversible because it's going to make your life a lot easier. Direct drive, the downside on the Ender 3s is you're going to lose vertical build volume. And I had a couple comments last week that people were losing upwards of 100 millimeters build volume. So unless you're willing to run new wires, you're going to reduce that Ender 3 to a max build height of about 175 to 200 mils on average.
Ohio Teen Tech, he says, I'm new here. What's the live stream schedule? Normally our live streams are on Saturday nights at 7 Mountain Time. Now for the next few weeks, we're going to be on Sundays at 7 Mountain Time. We will let you know if that's going to be permanent over the winter or not. But for the next few weeks, we are going to be on Sunday nights at 7. Okay?
And if you guys do like the Sunday nights better, please leave us some feedback in the comments below because we do this for you guys. So we'll work our schedule around it. Obviously, with the way the world is right now, I can't go out and enjoy my Saturday nights. So this is the next best thing. I get to enjoy it with you guys.
All right.
Just real quick, Brady was saying, unless you go to Chimera, I really, I want to try one of these darn things, but when they're priced at $200, I don't know.
They're not worth it to me at that price.
It's great, but you're what's the old term? You're putting lipstick on a pig.
Yep, and I did say that on my last video. And you know what?
Yeah,
I will say this about the Ender 3 V2. They haven't gone above and beyond, but they've sure made a better product for the entry market, and I'm really enjoying using it right now. So we are actually running over 8 o'clock. So before we get out of here real quick tonight, I want to cut over to this and let you guys know that if you have questions that you want to submit to us during the week, and we would really prefer if you did that, send them to questions@thefirstlayer.com. We have a special email set up. I get them. They come in on my tablet. They come in on my computer. So I will see them, and we usually answer those first, or at least we try to answer those first, and then we take questions from our chat. And again, using the super chat is a really good way to help us out and keep us creating new content and keep this show coming to you guys. We just crossed 20,000 last week. Can't thank you guys enough for that. And let's keep sharing. Let's keep thumbs up. Let's keep putting comments down below in the comment section after the video's over, and just keep going. The other thing is, if you are not yet a member, you can go ahead and become a member of our Facebook group. We usually welcome everybody. It's very rarely that we don't. You can also follow us on Instagram. I just posted a picture of our rocket on Instagram. If you want to, you can follow me on Cleveland IM on Twitter. I don't really do a whole lot on Twitter. And then, of course, you can always find us here on YouTube, The First Layer. So, going back to this one right here. Archie's great show, as always. Thank you.
And, while you guys are leaving all your comments, you can go ahead and subscribe, since 80% of our audience is not subscribed. And we,
Yes.
if there's a reason you're not subscribing, please let us know so that we can better cater content for you guys, because we like to fly by the seat of our pants. And I'm going to tell you right now, most of my weeks go by where I'm like, on Tuesday, I'm like, I've been putting off this video, maybe I should do it. And then one of the other channels, one of our other groups, they post something on, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So we don't want to produce repeating content either, but if there's something you think that people aren't covering, let us know and we'll do our best to dive into it, because we also like to see something new. And with us being cut off from the rest of the world right now, we don't get to see a lot of new things. So
go ahead, let us smash that like button. It helps us out in the algorithm. Leaving comments down below also helps us out in the algorithm. And we do appreciate you guys for showing up with us every weekend and taking time out of your busy schedules to come and join us and have a cup of coffee or, drink some water like I've been drinking like a camel. And tomorrow's Monday, and it's back to work. We've got another great episode coming for you this week. This week we are talking about back to school, and whether you're at home or actually going back to the classroom. We've got some great prints that we've dug up that maybe you want to print for yourself, and we will be showing you all that stuff on Wednesday. And then we are back here next Sunday night at 7 to talk to you again and answer your questions. So until then, I want to say, Brian, thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Brian.
Look at the other one. There we go. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Brian. Other than that, Ben Brady, let me just have a look here at what he's... you are sure a hump. What the hell is a hump? I don't know. It's getting late. It's Sunday night.
It's Sunday night, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you guys are working on some cool prints or some cool concepts, come over, join that Facebook group. I'd love to see your prints because it motivates me to do something usually even stupider, to be honest with you. So, I'm looking forward to your photos. And you know what? If you don't have any questions this week and you do have something you want to show off on the show, email it over to us at questions@thefirstlayer, and maybe we'll showcase some prints next week too.
There's my monkey cup. That's now holding my pens. So until we see you next time, remember, my friends, that the First Layer is always your foundation to a great print. Thank you again to everybody for the super chats, and we'll see you on Wednesday.
Bye for now.